If Ertz says, "Yeah, I'm going to show up," I mean, I think the Eagles were like, "No, you know what? Just why don't you just stay away? We won't fine you or whatever. Just yeah." I mean, because that's kind of happened in the past. I think teams told players to kind of stay away and everything like that. I mean, it just I can't see that happening. I think even as soon as Nick Sirianni got the job back in January, I mean, they kind of knew that Zach Ertz wouldn't be a part of the future. That's the kind of stuff that a head coach has to deal with. You mentioned it earlier. I mean, he's the face of the franchise. He's got to answer all these questions because Howie Roseman isn't going to be answering him until, he speaks to the media, which I think is probably cut down day, right?
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Lurie, same thing. I mean, he doesn't talk until maybe the week before the season. So, it's good practice for Nick Sirianni, kind of dealing with the adversity right off the bat.
It's a good point.
Can handle it. Doug Peterson had his ups and downs with that. We'll see if Nick Sirianni could be better.
Monday get together here on Bird 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys, who try almost every single day to bring in emotional intelligence. Well, we've achieved our goal today because joining us right now from down in the first state is our buddy Martin Frank. Martin, Jody Mac, and Johnny Mac here. How's your summer going?
It's going pretty well. Been playing a lot of rock, paper, scissors, trying to get ready for training camp, keeping the competition going as much as possible, finding
competition. There we go. Martin.
Whatever little games I can play, just to keep myself sharp.
And there's what Jody was talking about, the emotional intelligence. I saw you popped on while we were having that discussion about competition, about Nick Sirianni. Yeah, so where are we? Which one of us is right, Martin? You be the judge. You bring down the gavel. What's Nick Sirianni? Is Nick Sirianni being existential, or is he the normal football guy saying this guy's competing against this guy and he's overblowing some of the competition a little bit?
Well, he's overblowing a lot of it sometimes, but it is kind of funny because you have to have competition, I guess, in training camp, or at least bring that kind of
Is Martin freezing up on us?
Martin froze up on us. We'll try to get Martin back. We'll try to pop him up. But it's interesting because we were having that back and forth, and Martin, I think he was going down my route, but you had a difficult argument there because you are talking about football guys, and they are about football 24/7. And when they talk about competition, they're talking about competition, holding off this guy, holding off that guy. And by the way, when you say I'm criticizing Nick Sirianni, not really. He's like everybody else, Jody. Every other coach in this league preaches the same thing. He just went really far with it when he went, I think, a little bit probably too far with it, especially you start with the quarterback. You start with Jalen Hurts. I mean, look, Jalen Hurts is a second-year player with 4 career starts. He probably should be competing against somebody for this job. However, the Eagles don't have somebody in a position to push him anyway. So it becomes a situation where we all know who's going to be the week 1 starter anyway. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But you could argue, hey, you got to push the kid. You got to push him. But I think he has that in him anyway.
Right. The difference between you and I is a competition. You're looking at week 1. Yes, I agree. Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter week 1. Is he going to be the starter all 16 weeks? No. That he's not locked into.
No.
If there is the possibility he could be replaced, well, then I think that person, as soon as camp opens up, should be in competition. They should look at it as a competition. There's very few guys that are going to start week 1, week 17, and every week in between, no matter what their level of play. That's the way I'm defining competition. You certainly have it different, and we're debating on how the coach defines it.
Well, Carson Wentz proved that, Jody. I mean, Carson Wentz played himself off the field. So anybody can play themselves off the field. But I guess the point is the Fletcher Coxes of the world, the Carson Wentzes of the world, they had a long rope. You got to play really bad. You got to play to the point where you're expected to be a top 10 player at your position like Carson Wentz was, and all of a sudden you're the worst player at your position, and then maybe you get pulled off the field kicking and screaming. So from that standpoint, yes, anybody can play themselves off the field. Martin Frank has played himself back on the field, I believe. We got a smiling face. So there's Martin. Chime in with your thoughts on this competition.
All right. Well, I think like you have to look at the competition as kind of like a 2-year thing. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Hurts. Yes, he's going to be the starting quarterback week 1, but in a sense, he's like competing against someone the Eagles might want to draft in 2022 at quarterback in the first round. I mean, if he doesn't play well this year, they're going to draft a quarterback, and he won't be the guy. Now, it's also like that, like at other positions too. You look at the offensive line. I mean, yes, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo are the starters, but in 2022, is Kelsey going to retire? Is Brooks going to come back? Can Lane Johnson stay healthy? And you got guys that they've drafted the past couple of years who might come in and take the spot. I mean, obviously Landon Dickerson's going to play somewhere in 2022 as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be the center? Is he going to be a right guard, a left guard? They could draft somebody in the first round again next year. And you look at, obviously you do have the competition at left tackle with Dillard and Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata, but I mean, are those guys, whoever wins that competition, are those guys going to be the starter in 2022? I mean, there's competition there too. So it's like a 3-way deal at left tackle. I mean, not only are they competing against themselves for this year, but they're also competing to be the starter going forward after that. So it's kind of like that, like at a lot of different positions. Yeah. I mean, it might seem like Fletcher Cox, for example, is obviously going to be the starter at defensive tackle, but is he going to come back in 2022? What about Brandon Graham? Guys like that. A lot of veterans, yeah, they seem obviously going to be set this year, but what about the future? I mean, that's what those guys are probably competing against, to kind of show Nick Sirianni that they could be the guys going forward beyond this year.
Here's how far I'll take my competition belief. And it's not just player A against player B. That's cut and dry. There's a whole bunch of guys on this Eagle team that they know they're player A. So you don't have to worry about player B. But there were more competitions than that, as in like how much you're going to do this upcoming season. I think Devonta Smith's in competition. Now, you're talking to as big a Devonta Smith as you could find in the Delaware Valley. I can easily say I was on the Devonta Smith bandwagon before almost anybody else in Philadelphia because I loved the kid as a junior at Alabama. I said I would take him off the Judy's and the Ruggs that were picked in the first round last year. So I've been a fan of his a long time. I don't care. He's in competition this year, competing for number of balls thrown his way. The Eagles use their first round draft pick on him. They've got high expectations. Everybody's talking him up a blue streak. But Jalen, he needs to come in and prove that he's worthy of having the ball thrown his way 100 some odd times this year. And the more that he does in preseason, the more that he leads up to the season, the more he does once the season starts, that number is going to grow. I think the Eagles are leaning toward him being their number one guy and are planning on. But if he comes in and he doesn't live up to their internal expectations, he's not going to get the ball as much as maybe some of us think. So I would say even that Devonta Smith is competing. He's competing against the coach's expectations. Is that a fair way to look at it, Martin?
It is, but then you also have to look at the alternative. I mean, if he's not getting 100 balls thrown his way this year, I mean, they're in pretty big trouble. I mean, unless Rager shows that he's, could be the guy. Beyond that, I mean, you got a lot of question marks. I mean, obviously Dallas Goedert's going to get a lot of balls thrown his way and everything, but Devonta Smith, I guess, is in competition in that point of view. But if he can't handle it, I mean, they're in big trouble because that's 2 years in a row they drafted a wide receiver in the first round, and if they can't come through, I mean, I don't know what you do after that. I mean, you pretty much have to like sign every expensive free agent you can and make a trade. I mean, technically he is in competition, but if he can't win that competition, they're in big trouble.
All right, Martin, I'm going to throw one at you that nobody talks about. Certainly a guy who should have competition that doesn't have competition. And that's the punter of this team, Aaron Cepas. And people go, we have 2 hours to talk about this minutia, so we're going to talk about it. Nobody talks about the punter. Never punted in an NFL game. Right. Now, I know you and I, Martin, we used to talk to Dave Bipp, and we used to ask Dave Bipp questions about why doesn't Jake Elliott have competition? Why doesn't Cam Johnston have competition? And he would say, well, they're competing against everybody else in the league in different cities. If they don't perform their job, we'll just bring somebody else in. But there's a big difference from somebody standing right next to you every day on the practice field, maybe booming a punt while you're shanking a punt versus, okay, maybe somebody in Detroit who's not going to be the main punter is all of a sudden playing pretty well in the preseason. For a coach, for a team, for an organization that preaches competition, how could you have Aaron Cepas and say, oh, here's your job, Aaron Cepas? Who the hell's Aaron Cepas, Martin Frank?
I agree totally. I mean, and what about Jake Elliott? I mean, he's coming off the worst year of his career. They didn't bring in another kicker, as far as I can tell.
No.
I mean, I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, it is possible they could get somebody. If those guys aren't doing the job, they can get somebody up, off the waiver wire. I mean, that's how they got Jake Elliott in the first place. He was on the Bengals squad, right?
Yes.
Up there, so. It's possible. I mean, I also find it curious they didn't have anybody. They didn't bring anybody in, at least at punter or kicker. I mean, you're going with, punter you mentioned, unproven, has never punted in an NFL game. And you're also going with the kicker coming off the worst year of his career. I think he missed like a 22-yard field goal, didn't he? And a couple 30-yarders.
Yeah, Jake. I always Jake that Jake is great at everything. Rock, paper, scissors, golf, basketball, trick shots. Except 33-yard extra points and 22-yard field goals. He's great at everything except the gimme kicks. He's even great at 50-yard kicks. He's great.
Yeah.
But get him in 33 yards and you got some iffy questions. Some yips.
I'll tell you what, I actually agree with Phipp. And if that were not the way of the National Football League, then you could roll your eyes at him. But how many times over the course of the year do we see not here in Philadelphia at all times, but judging all 32 teams, they just cut the punter and bring in a new guy. It does happen in the league all the time. They just cut the kicker and bring in a new guy. It's not like there isn't a track record of this happening. When the coach is talking about it and saying, well, we're judging everyone else in every other team in every other town. Yeah, they are, because it happens all the time in the National Football League. So if Aaron Cepas gets off to a bad start, has 2 bad weeks kicking, I think he'll be out of here. And the Eagles will bring in somebody else off the quote-unquote scrap heap, and he'll be the new punter of the Philadelphia Eagles. I do think that's realistic.
Well, it happens all the time. Let me jump in before you, Martin. Then you can give your thoughts. I'm not saying it happens all the time. You're right, Jody. That's how a lot of teams do it. But there have been punting competitions. I mean, Cam Johnston was here when Donnie Jones was here, trying to push him at the end of his career. This is not rare, punting competitions around the league. If you don't have a proven punter, that's why I didn't bring up Jake Elliott. Martin's right. You could say Jake Elliott had his worst year, but he's a proven NFL kicker. Aaron Cepas has never punted in an NFL game. There should be another punter in here pushing him. And the fact that you talk about competition and the realization that the NFL does this business where punters are a dime a dozen, maybe that's an issue. Maybe you should be a little innovative. We talked about innovative thinking. Maybe have a backup plan, not go, oh, this guy can't do it. Where's my phone? Let me call somebody at the last minute. Am I crazy?
Yeah, I find it strange. I mean, unless they feel this guy is like the second coming or whatever. I mean, I think you have to have at least 2 punters. I mean, you have to have 2 punters in camp this year. I mean, just to see who can win the job. I mean, it just seems kind of strange. That's all.
All right, Martin, I'm going to ask this question of you and John together, but I want you to answer first because we've got good manners here on Birds 365, and you're an invited guest, so you get to go first.
Great.
If you watch this ever before, Martin, John is already getting tired of me doing this, but I love it. It's a hypothetical question, but it's not all that hypothetical, okay? I'd say the chances of it happening is about 98%. First availability with the media after the Eagles' first workout, whenever they decide to let you guys get your first question to Nick Sirianni. Who of your contingent, you Eagle beat guys, is going to be the guy who's going to look at Nick Sirianni through the Zoom lens and say, Coach, what about Zach Ertz? Zach Ertz is still a member of the team. Zach Ertz either shows up for the first workout or he doesn't, or they've got him in a hotel somewhere because he wants to report, but they don't actually want him there at the facilities. Who's going to be, which of the Eagle beat guys is going to be the one who's going to ask Nick upbeat, emotionally intelligent, competition-driven Sirianni, how about that Zach Ertz? Is he going to come in and compete for the Eagles tight end job? Who's going to be the one out of the crew of you guys that's going to actually do that to the coach?
I think it'll be like one of the people who get like one of the first few questions. Could be Johnny Mack. I mean, he's usually like right up there at the beginning. Someone like McManus, Tim McManus, keep with the Mick theme going and everything. You know, it'll be one of the first questions because that's one of like the main elephants in the room is like, what's going on with Zach Ertz? Why is he still, you know, technically on the roster? Why hasn't he been traded? You know, released? Is he going to show up? Is he not going to show up? I mean, chances are, you know, it's probably he's not going to show up. I mean, I can't see him showing up at all. So yeah, that's going to be one of the first questions. I mean, what's going on with Zach Ertz? Why is he still on the roster? It'll be pretty quickly, as far as I'm concerned, in the Nick Sirianni press conference.
Yeah, by the way, that's an unfair question for Nick Sirianni, but that's part of the job when you're the Eagles head coach, because you're not involved in that decision, but Howie's not going to talk to us. Jeffrey's not going to talk to us about these types of issues. So you're the face of the franchise. Nick Sirianni, let's throw you into the deep end of the pool. You got to handle these types of questions. Even, by the way, it has nothing to do with you other than the fact that the head coach and this new coaching staff has sort of formulated their plans. And Dallas Goedert is going to be the number one tight end on this team. Mm-hmm. And that's how they're moving forward. So it would probably be helpful to Nick Sirianni if Howie Roseman could cut the vacation a little bit short, make a decision, say, you know what, he's not part of our plans. Let's just move on. Martin, that's where I'm going to go with the next question. Is that the way Howie Roseman should handle this, or should he go the way he's going, which is, I want to win this trade at all costs. I want to win. Sometimes you have to maybe take a step back to take two forward. Is that the way you would look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like at this point, if he hasn't made any kind of decision on Zach Ertz by now, I mean, he's probably just going to wait it out. I mean, you know, once you start training camp, injuries happen. Yeah, you know, there'll be a team looking for a tight end. I mean, the Buffalo Bills obviously are a team that could use a good tight end. I mean, you know, Carson Wentz with the Colts and everything like that. I mean, something will shake itself out. I mean, you know, the fact that Howie hasn't done anything yet, it's kind of like an indication he's going to like drag this out as long as possible, which, you know, I find kind of curious, but at the same time, that's kind of like the way he's been doing it. So it wouldn't surprise me if this went on into like early mid-August, you know, before something happened. I mean, I'd like to think, you know, before the regular season starts, they would have some kind of resolution one way or the other. I mean, not only for the Eagles' sake, you know, but also for Zach Ertz. I mean, you know, he'll be sitting there in limbo for what, the past 5 months now, going back to February. I mean, it's, you know, time for him to move on as well. I mean, you know, I think it behooves everybody to kind of like just get this over with and everything. But yeah, if it goes into August, I think that's very possible at this point. I think Howie's pretty much resolute in his thinking that he's going to get something for Zach Ertz at all costs. And, you know, if he has to wait until August, then he will. I mean, at this point.
All right. Well, since you went there, then I'm going to ask this question. Zach Ertz certainly made it obvious enough that he wants to restart his career somewhere else, that the Eagles didn't renegotiate his deal, that he's very disappointed in that. We do have a new coaching staff in place, so certain things can change. But the fact that Howie's still running the show and controlling the purse strings is going to bother the tight end. But he never said, and I'm not showing up. Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay has certainly hinted at, I may not show up. Zach Ertz has never gone that far. If we get to the reporting date, and then we have several weeks of camp before the first preseason game, and then several more weeks before the first regular season game, Zach Ertz has not said, I'm not showing up. What if he shows up? Do they bring him in? Is he going to get on a uniform? Is he going to go out and run some reps and take some snaps? Or are the Eagles going to say, listen, we don't really want you here at the facilities. If you're telling us you're ready to play, we're not ready to take you in. How is it going to play if Zach Ertz shows up?
Yeah, I can't see that. I can't see that happening. I mean, even if like the scenario you presented, if Ertz says, yeah, I'm going to show up, I mean, I think the Eagles are like, no, you know what? Just why don't you just stay away? We won't fine you or whatever, just. Yeah, I mean, because that's kind of happened in the past, I think, like, teams told players to kind of stay away and everything like that. I mean, I can't see that happening. I think, like, even as soon as Nick Sirianni got the job back in January, I mean, they kind of knew that Zach Ertz wouldn't be a part of the future. So I don't think all of a sudden they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should bring Zach Ertz back and let's design some plays for him. Let's make him a big part of the offense. I mean, I think, Sirianni kind of got the job. No, I mean, for many reasons, but one of them being that, they're moving on in a lot of positions, and tight end is first and foremost among those. I mean, Dallas Goedert's going to be the guy. At some point, they're going to sign him to an extension. They're not going to let him get to free agency and everything like that. So I think they made their decision. I can't see any kind of scenario where Zach Ertz is like running routes in training camp, whether he's, if he's still on the team. And, I'd like to think this gets resolved pretty quickly, but like I said before, if it goes in, first few weeks of August, that still gives Ertz a lot of time, like close to a month to get ready for the regular season with this new team. I mean, I can't see any kind of situation where he's catching passes in training camp from Jalen Hurts or Nick Mullins or Joe Flacco.
Nick Mullins. Yeah, the Nick Mullins reference.
Yeah.
But, Martin, I want to bring up, and I want to give Andrew Brandt credit for this because he was on the show last week with us. And he obviously ran the Packers for years. He was with the Eagles for a short period as well. He had mentioned the CBA doesn't allow you to do that, the new CBA. So if Zach Ertz isn't here, he gets fined $40,000 per day. And the Eagles can't waive that fine. They used to be back in the day, teams would just go, okay, we're going to fine you, we're going to fine you, we're going to fine you. They work things out. They just waive the fines. You're not allowed to do that anymore. So Andrew, being the bright guy he is, I didn't even think of this. How can teams get around that? They could have Zach Ertz report, but not come on the field.
Right.
And work out something with him behind the scenes and say, okay, we're trying to move you. But my point is the brilliance of Andrew's, thinking outside the box and getting something like that done. My take on that is, if you're Howie Roseman, why do you want your rookie head coach going through that? He's got enough problems already to start his first training camp, and all the logistics and all the questions and everything that's going to be coming down on him on a day-to-day basis. Why do you want to add to that plate again for the rookie head coach?
That's a good question. I mean, in the general scheme of things, I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. I mean, I don't think, Nick Sirianni is saying, oh, wait a minute, do I have to make some kind of arrangement for Zach Ertz? Do I have to design plays for him and everything like that? I mean, I think they already know. I mean, I think they've already moved on and everything. So I'm not sure that's going to be a big thing weighing on Nick Sirianni's mind. I mean, I think they've already made up their minds in that regard. I mean, at least they should have by now if they haven't.
You would think.
But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that a head coach has to deal with. You mentioned it earlier. I mean, he's the face of the franchise. He's got to answer all these questions because Howie Roseman isn't going to be answering him until, he speaks to the media, which I think is probably cut down day, right?
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Lurie, same thing. I mean, he doesn't talk until like maybe the week before the season. So, it's good practice for Nick Sirianni, kind of dealing with the adversity right off the bat.
It's a good point.
Can handle it. Doug Peterson had his ups and downs with that. We'll see if Nick Sirianni could be better.
Let's stick with the head coach. Over the weekend, Jeff Skwersky from 6ABC had a chance to talk to Lane Johnson. And Lane bent over backwards, at least verbally, to throw a bone to his new head coach, Nick Sirianni. Has said he is doing a great job commanding and leading the team. They've had a handful of workouts and practices during this offseason. It was limited shoot. It was cut back by the Eagles so they didn't have to call anything mandatory just to get the number of guys who would show up for the non-mandatories up in a negotiation with the union and the like. So I don't know how much time Nick Sirianni has actually had to show his wares, show what he's accomplished as the head coach, but at least in Lane Johnson's eyes, he's shown plenty. And that when your Pro Bowl right tackle is saying you've done a great job commanding the room, that does say something. How much do we read into that? Is that Lane Johnson just being a good Philadelphia Eagle, or is Nick Sirianni actually doing things, opening minds with the few, and I do use that word few, chances he's had to actually coach up these players so far?
Yeah, well, what I found interesting, like pretty much every player we've talked to during the spring has pretty much said the same thing. I mean, they go out of their way to mention like his energy, his leadership, the way he makes, practices fun so far. I mean, we saw like the last practice at the stadium, he had all these gadgets set up and everything like that. And, I mean, that's the thing. You gotta, for a new guy coming in with a lot of veterans on the team, a guy who's never been a head coach before, you have to make an impression pretty much right away. If you want to keep guys like Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, I mean, Darius Slay, veterans like that, they can see through, like, if you're real or not. If you're just like a rah phony type of guy, I mean, those kind of players can see through that, and then they stop playing, and that trickles down to the rest of the team. So the fact that guys like Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey are saying those things about Sirianni is obviously a feather in his cap, and it's a good sign going forward. I mean, if you're a new head coach, you have to make it fun. You have to be able to get these guys, the veterans especially, to like buy into what you're selling, and then pass that along to the younger guys and show them how the way that's done. I mean, so it's a good sign, I mean, going forward. But like you said, we've only had a handful of practices, and those weren't even like 7-on-7 or 11-on-11s. I mean, we'll get the real test of that in training camp. And, if he's one of those guys who like, really long, hard practices and everything like that, it's going to be, players will pick up on that pretty quickly, and it might not work out so well. So, we only have a snippet so far. We don't have much, but we'll find out more in training camp.
All right, last one from me, Martin, and we're about 2 weeks out. So everybody bookmark DelawareOnline.com to make sure you read Martin Frank leading into training camp and throughout training camp. It's getting too close for me, Martin. So little inside baseball here with our buddy Bob Groats. What's the hard angle of training camp? What are you most looking for? Give me one storyline you're most looking forward to covering that's interesting to you.
Oh, man, there are actually quite a few, but I mean, the obvious one would be the left tackle position, with Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata. I mean, it's kind of a fascinating situation. I mean, Dillard was their number one pick 2 years ago, and it was with the understanding that he would be, sitting for a year behind Jason Peters. He ended up getting into like 3 or 4 games that year, kind of like mixed results and everything like that. And then, he got hurt all last year, so he didn't play. So we don't even really know, like, if this guy's for real. I mean, there was talk that he dropped in the draft because teams weren't convinced about his makeup and everything. So, this is a fascinating story. And Mailata obviously is one in himself, being, guy who never even played organized football until the Eagles picked him in the 7th round in 2018. And here he was starting and playing pretty well, towards the end of last year, especially. That's kind of a fascinating story for me. Jalen Hurts is another one. I mean, obviously, is he the quarterback of the future, or does he have to show to be the quarterback of the future? I mean, he only completed what 52% of his passes last year. I mean, that's obviously an issue. Like if he completes 60% and he runs for like 700-800 yards, I mean, you've got like another Lamar Jackson on your hands, basically. So that'll be interesting to watch, and and also the defense. I mean, there's so many situations with the defense that could either like make it surprisingly one of the better ones in the NFL, or if it doesn't work at all, I mean, one of the worst. I mean, it could be pretty ugly, obviously. So, yeah, those are like the main storylines that people are going to be looking for once training camp starts. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, good or bad. I mean, the Eagles are never dull, and this situation is obviously one where it could either be really, really bad or really, really good, and we'll find out. Beginning in 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to it already.
All right, Martin, I'm going to follow up on the last point you just made about the quarterback, because this is the National Football League we're talking about, right, where the quarterback dictates basically everything. Jalen Hurts, first year as the starter, game number 1. We got the peek at him last year for the games that he did. And let's be honest, what kind of stood out was his ability to run with the football. And we know that you have to be able to pass the football at the quarterback position. But Lamar Jackson makes an argument for running the football being a key component to potentially winning in the NFL. He won the MVP with his ability to run the football. And if Jalen Hurts can do Lamar Jackson-like things here in Philadelphia, I think that will help the Eagles be a better football team than maybe most people are projecting. But Jalen Hurts is going to be the guy who's going to decide on a lot of those plays. And we've all talked about what he's doing. Is he competing against himself this year because he's not a lock to be the quarterback next year? He needs to keep that in the back of his mind every single minute of every single day. I got to win this job for the next several coming years. Right. Is that going to lend himself to running the same as he did last year, more than he did last year, or less than he did last year? I'm going to ask you to try and mind meld with the Eagles quarterback here for a second. How does he look at his running capabilities? Is it something he wants to make even grow more? Is it something he thinks he needs to cut back on? We saw what he did last year. This year, is it going to be more or less? And is he going to decide that because he knows his fate is in his hands?
I think it's not a question of like running more or less. I think it's a question of finding the best spots to run. I think a lot of times last year, if you go back and look at his tape, I mean, I think that was kind of like his first reaction. Like he didn't see anybody open, boom, take off and run. I mean, I think you have to kind of like pick your spots better. I don't think you can just do that right away if you don't see your first option open. I mean, if he doesn't see Devontae Smith going deep, and throw it right away, then, check down, throw it to Dallas Goedert over the middle, or throw it to Greg Ward, or, something like that, or look the other way to Jalen Reagor. I mean, I think he has to be better in making those kind of decisions more so than just whether or not to run or not. I mean, because obviously he can run, and obviously if he does get in the open field, he can be pretty dangerous. But if you're doing that too much and you're not throwing to the receivers, the guys that they picked in the first round the last couple of years, or you're missing those guys, then that's the bigger issue as far as I'm concerned. And that's kind of Jalen Hurts' test going into this year. I mean, he has to pick his spots better, when to run, when to pass, and he also can't miss wide open guys. I mean, we saw that with Carson Wentz like too often last year, obviously, which is why he's not here. So, if that happens with Jalen Hurts, he won't be here next year either. So, yeah, I think it's not a question of whether he'll run more or less. I think it's just a question of whether he'll run better, if that makes any sense.
It surely does. Martin, good stuff. Get ready for some quality grass time with John McMullen. It is just around the corner. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We'll certainly get you on once Eagle Camp opens up again.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it. Anytime I can get on with John McMullen on the grass is a great day for me. So looking forward to it already.
There's Martin Frank being a politician, just like Lane Johnson.
Thanks, Martin. Martin Frank here with us on Birds 365. All right, we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the politician status of Lane Johnson. Because I got to admit, I was surprised he went as strongly as he did in backing his new head coach. John thinks it's a little bit more of him just doing the right thing, playing the smart card. I'm hoping that it's the actual card that, yes, the coach is actually showing these things. We'll come back and continue to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.